You're listening to Stories Behind the Songs with Chris Blair. For more information, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at SBT Songs, or check us out at chrisblair.com. Hey everybody, Chris Blair here with another episode of Stories Behind the Songs, and Victoria Banks is joining us this week. Victoria is what some people in the music industry would call a unicorn. She writes some of her best songs completely 100% all by herself. She has several accolades to her name, including Canadian Artist and Songwriter of the Year. Some of Victoria's cuts include Saints and Angels by Sara Evans, What Are You Gonna Tell Her by Mickey Guyton, and the one and only Reba McEntire's most recent single, I Can't. And she's gonna share the story of each one of those songs. In this episode, we also talk about her song, Saints and Angels, and how it was edited and used as a post-9/11 anthem, how she dares to suck in co-writes, building a decade-long collaborative relationship with Mickey Guyton, teaching at Belmont where she can be there for the students from the very beginning of their songwriting career, and getting that Reba cut, I Can't, which was 18 years after it was put on hold, and then she got to see it debuted on The Voice. Very cool. Victoria plays a verse chorus of Saints and Angels, I Can't, and an emotional rendition of What Are You Gonna Tell Her? It was so amazing. Check it out. There's so much good advice for aspiring songwriters in this one. Thanks so much to Victoria for sharing some of her wisdom. Let's get into it. Here is Victoria Banks. All right, here we are back in Nashville with Victoria Banks. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for coming in today and being a part of this.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we've known each other for a long time, and I can't wait to just dive into all the stories behind the songs.
Yeah.
So let's start from the beginning. You're from Canada. How did you get into music in the first place?
My dad was a collector of antique phonograph records. And our house was crammed full of them. And I grew up in a house in the woods that was heated with just wood. So it was off grid, just, kind of isolated. And so that was the music I grew up with. Crank it up and you listen to it through the horn.
Yeah.
But a lot of the songs on those cylinders were really resonated with me. Like a really beautiful old folk songs, Stephen Foster songs, things from the turn of the century. And they, even though they were 100 years old, they still felt like they were relevant. And so I fell in love with songwriting through that, and found my way into bands when I was in school.
What'd you play?
I played keys. I was usually like the extra chick that got paid if there was anything left over, because I would be there anyway.
Yeah.
And then I played guitar a little bit too, picked up guitar to write, but started writing songs during that time and discovered the radio. What is this magic? What is this new music?
Yeah.
So and then ended up going to University of Toronto to get a degree in zoology of all things, because I was a country girl and I loved being outside and I loved fish, and fish were my specialty. And, but the whole time I was there, I was writing song lyrics across all my notes.
Yeah.
And, so when I graduated, I knew that I needed to try and pursue songwriting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So zoology to music.
Yeah.
So you came to the States on a 6-month visa.
Yeah.
So walk us through how that went.
Yeah. So I saved up all the money that I could, because, it's hard for anybody moving to Nashville and trying to make ends meet and trying to make things happen for themselves and get signed to a deal as a songwriter. But for someone who's coming from out of the country, you have this extra barrier of having to have, the clock is ticking on being able to stay. And so I knew I had a 6-month visitor visa. And at the end of that time, I was going to run out of money and couldn't just go make money somewhere. I had to go home. So, and B, I would need somebody to sponsor me for a visa to stay. And in order to do that, I would need to be offered a publishing deal as a staff songwriter. And so I had saved all my money up, and literally for 6 months, I lived on my friend's couch, Derek Rattan, who's a great songwriter in town. He was also from the same hometown. We played in a band together growing up. And so I lived on his couch and We didn't turn the heat on in the winter. We just cut the ends of our gloves out so we could play guitar and write songs in the cold, and save our money. And so I was down to my last $20 6 months later when I was offered my first publishing deal. Thank God. Yeah, and it just under the wire, really.
Yeah. So that was with Fame.
That was with Fame, yeah.
How did that come about? Like when you first moved to town, like what were you doing to get your name out there and build up camp of songwriters that you knew that led you to Fame?
Yeah. There were a couple of sort of hangout places back in the late 90s for songwriters. One of them was the Broken Spoke, which has now kind of morphed a little bit into the Commodore. It's some of the same people over there. And the Bluebird Cafe, of course. And so I would write songs every day, and every night I would go out to one of those places, and I would either perform the songs or listen to other people perform their songs, and got to know some amazing songwriters through that. Actually, Tony Lane, who's a great friend of mine and a really successful songwriter now, was there at the same time that I was. And I just sort of came up with a group of people and performed a ton. And I got the attention of somebody who knew a man named Ralph Murphy at ASCAP. And Ralph was the writer rep at ASCAP, and it was his job to try and help songwriters find their way into publishing deals. So I called him and went in for a meeting, and he guided me through the process of getting some demos put together. And when I brought the demos in, he listened to them, and he immediately got on the phone and called 3 different publishers and told them, hey, I've got this girl, you might want to meet her and listen to her songs. And actually at the time, it was a really rockin' time for women on country radio. It was the time of Martina McBride and Faith Hill and Leanne Womack and, Sara Evans. And so the kinds of music that I was writing was in line with that. And there weren't a lot of women songwriters in town that were staff songwriters. So most publishers were looking actively to sign a woman to be able to represent a woman's perspective in the songwriting process. Yeah. So it worked in my favor. And one of the meetings I had was with Fame Publishing, which is Rick Hall's company, based out of Muscle Shoals Fame Studios, but they had an office here. Yeah. So that was my first deal.
We talk a lot on this podcast about co-writing, and I want to get into that in a little bit, but it's always interesting to hear like who's got the idea and then how the collaboration works in the room, and all of that process for all of these great songs that come out of Nashville. But I want to dive into you're a little bit of a unicorn, and that your first cut for one of those amazing artists that you just mentioned, Sara Evans, that you wrote 100% by yourself.
Yeah. So I had not really co-written when I moved to town. I had written an embarrassingly small number of songs at all when I moved to town. I just started doing it when I got here, really full on, And so I was writing alone a lot. And when I signed my first publishing deal, the songs that I had written alone were the ones that were attracting my publisher in the first place. But they encouraged me to get in the room with other people and do some co-writing. And I tried to do it, but I sucked at it. I was so terrible at co-writing because I was really shy and I didn't know how to express what was going on inside when I was writing. And I was really unsure of myself. And so I felt like, oh, if they're saying it should be that way, that's probably right. I just won't say anything, And so I didn't contribute. So my publishers would listen to what I'd co-written and listen to what I'd written alone. And they were like, what you're writing alone is way better. Just do that, which is really unusual. Yeah. They didn't pressure me to co-write. So I ended up writing alone pretty much for the first 6 years of my career. And one of those songs that I wrote, actually, it was one that I wrote very early in my publishing deal, like the first couple of weeks, was Saints and Angels, which I wrote it for Sara Evans. And
So when you wrote it, you knew like, hey, it was like a pitch sheet or something that you were like.
Actually, no. I don't know why I said I wrote it for Sara Evans. It was pitched to Sara Evans. But it was one that, I just wrote it alone. It was an idea that I had that I'd been walking around with, and it was just the title, and I didn't know what the title meant. But then I started falling in love. And then when I was falling in love, I opened up that hook book one day and I looked at my list of titles and I saw Saints and Angels and I thought, oh, I know what that means. I know what the context is for that now. And so I ended up writing the song, and it came out really fast. Like, I remember I was sitting cross-legged on the floor of my apartment. It was like a postage stamp sized apartment, and just writing this song. And then a few months later, there it is coming through the radio speakers.
Yeah.
It was crazy. I'll play you a little bit of it.
Yeah. Do you remember where you were when you came up with the idea or heard something that was like, oh, that's a cool hook?
I don't remember where the hook itself came from. It was one I'd been carrying around for a little while because I tended to, and I still do, collect titles.
Yeah.
So I don't know where the title originally came from, but I do remember where I was the first time I heard the song on the radio, because I was driving my car, which was just a junker of a car because my publishing income was so low. Like, as a staff songwriter, I was like making, $12,000 a year,
Yeah.
And so my car, I had to start the car by shorting the starter out with a beer can underneath.
I'm Victoria, I didn't know this about you. That's amazing.
So I'm a mechanic's daughter. Yes. And you just make do, right?
Yeah.
So for a while, it was like, if it was raining, you had to start it with the beer can.
Oh, I love that.
And so I was driving this car, and it was out near Mount Juliet outside Nashville. And the song came on the radio, and I was like, oh my God, that's my song. And I turned it up as loud as it would go, and it was crazy. And I realized about halfway through the song that I was going really fast, because, you turn it up and
that adrenaline kicked in.
And then I looked up, in the rearview mirror, there were blue lights flashing behind me. And so there was an officer behind me, and I had to pull over to the shoulder of the road. And he walked up to the window, and I rolled the window down, and I'm like, that's my song. That song's still playing. And I'm like, that's my song. Oh my God, I wrote that song. That's my song on the radio. And he just looks at me and he goes, license and registration, please, ma'am. He did not care one bit, because he probably gets that excuse all the time. But anyhow, thanks to Sarah, who put this on her Born to Fly record, I paid for a car that started with a key.
I love it.
Much better.
Yeah. Let's hear a little bit of it.
All right. Human, baby, we walk on broken ground, we lose our way, we come unwound, we turn in circles, baby, we're never satisfied, we fall from grace, forget we can fly, but through all the tears that we cry, we'll survive, 'cause when we're torn apart, shattered and scarred, love has the grace to save us. We're just two tarnished hearts, but in each other's arms, we become saints and angels.
Love it.
I remember when I won an ASCAP award for that song, because, the top 50 songs of the year in country music, the songwriters are presented with ASCAP awards. And so I got to go get dressed up and walk the red carpet, your one fancy moment as a songwriter, and I went up on stage to get my award, and I realized that night that out of 50 songs, the only 2 songs that were written by one person without co-writing was my song and Alan Jackson. Which was, I think, Where Were You When the World Stopped Turning?
Yeah.
So,
Well, and then both of those, your song and Alan's song, those both became big tribute songs after 9/11. So how was that?
That was wild. The song, My song, actually, when I heard it on the radio, that was just weeks before 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
The song had just started climbing the chart. And I remember that day, it was just like everything that had been played on the radio, they just stopped because nothing seemed right. The breath was taken out of everybody's chest and nobody knew what to say, what to do. And so I remember thinking, well, I mean, my song's never going to get played again now. It's a love song. I mean, I wrote this from my wise old 23-year-old perspective on romantic love, you know. So this isn't going to mean anything now. But about a week later, I turned the radio on again and I heard my song again, but they had taken Sarah's voice out of the second verse and replaced it with sound bites from the first responders at 9/11.
Mm.
And I remember hearing that and it just hit me. I was like, oh my God, I think this song could be about a bigger love than I thought. And that's the crazy thing, you know, when you're a songwriter, you're just holding the pen for something and sometimes you don't even understand completely what it is.
Yeah.
So that it was remarkable to hear that. And it was a really pivotal time in country radio too, because it sort of marked the end, unfortunately, of the time when women were reigning the airwaves. And I didn't realize that at the time, that I thought, oh, this is the beginning of my career. I wrote this by myself. Now everybody's going to want my songs. You know, it's going to be awesome. And little did I know what a desert I was going to be walking into at that point, because it was another 10 years before I ever heard another one of my songs come through the radio speakers again after that. And it wasn't for lack of writing. I was writing every day. I was on publishing deals and it just wasn't breaking through.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Let's dive into like, what was that time after Saints and Angels, and, you know, just what was it like for you going through that process and then leading up to the next cut?
Well, I mean, it's such a work ethic business, right? It sounds like a lot of fun, and it is a lot of fun, but every day you're showing up and you're writing a song a day, and sometimes 2 and sometimes 3, and it's 5 days a week, and it's pretty nonstop.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I was my publishing deal ended at Fame around the same time that my personal life crashed and burned, and I went through a divorce, and it was the biggest curse and the biggest blessing that I have experienced creatively, because it forced me to look at how I had been doing things and analyze what was working and what wasn't. And I was like, I have got to get out of my comfort zone more. I've got to get out of my shell. I've got to start co-writing with people, because I'm sick of myself. After 6 years, it's like you're a dog going around the same part of the yard over and over again. You're limited by your own ability to play and your own thoughts and tendencies in writing. So I signed a new deal and I committed to going into co-writing with people, and I actually did some therapy about it to try and figure out how to approach it in a way that didn't feel so scary. And I realized that I had to allow myself to dare to suck. I mean, and just hold that motto in my mind all day when I'm co-writing with people: dare to suck. Like, it doesn't matter if it's an unfinished thought. It doesn't matter if it sounds stupid in your own head. You got to share it.
Yeah. Sometimes those are the ideas that end up being magical.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So it's a combination of that. And then for me, I've very much come to see creativity as something that you don't necessarily control, but it's like you're not the source of it, but you're the conduit to a source with a capital S, whatever you want to call that source. And so when I think of the source as something beyond myself, but that I always have access to, then it allows me to take the pressure off myself for being that source. And then it's just about, how can I be kind to myself and allow myself to be the best faucet to just let the water come through today, you know? And so thinking about it that way really helped too. It's just like going into a co-write or going into a writing situation with faith that something's going to show up if you listen for it. And then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it does. Yeah. You know? Yeah. So I did a lot of co-writing, and I started to find some people that I really connected with over the years. And I also started to make my own records.
Yeah.
So that was another part of that leap of dangerous faith that I was taking at that time in my life, because I had been writing all these songs that weren't finding their way to artists. And I was like, somebody needs to record these. I guess it's me.
Yeah.
I guess it'll be me. So I made a record that was just demos. I just went into the process, and cut things the same way that I cut demos. Because at that point, I'd been used to going in a studio and producing.
Sure.
It was part of my job. And then the record, I meant for it to be just something I could sell after my songwriter shows. But it fell into the hands of a Canadian record label. And in Canada, they have Canadian content laws that require them to play a certain amount of Canadian written or Canadian artist content or produced. And because what I was doing fit the bill and was Nashville quality, they were like, hey, no brainer, we'll offer you a record deal. And hey, do you want to go out on tour? And so before I knew it, I found myself in a kind of dual job of every weekend flying up to Canada to play festivals or open shows. And I toured across Canada with Reba and Winona and Randy Travis and Lone Star, and just me and my guitar. Like, I'd never played anything that wasn't just a songwriter night. And here I was, like, 8,000 people. I guess I'll just do the same thing.
Yeah.
Tell the story, play the song, And it worked. And so I would do that on the weekends, and then I would fly back and be in the writing chair, writing for other people for like Monday to Thursday. And so it was just constantly doing that. And so it was kind of crazy because all the seeds I had planted in all of those different directions kind of came up at the same time in the year 2010, because the Canadian Country Music Association named me Female Artist of the Year, and simultaneously named me Songwriter of the Year for something I had written for somebody else. So it was kind of crazy.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah. But I always think about it like songwriting is so much like farming. It's like you're planting seeds and you're just hoping something's going to come up, you know? And all you can do is plant them the best you can. And then some of them do and some of them don't. Yeah. And you can't really control that. So, yeah.
What would you say the biggest differences are between music industry here in the States versus Canada?
Well, Canada is like a microcosm of America. It's about 10% the size. So everything is 10% the size, including your income, right? So it's like you do the touring, all of that. You do the radio tours. It's the same kind of thing that you would do here. But it's more manageable. There are fewer radio stations to visit. And then a platinum record here is $1 million, and a platinum record there is like 10,000. Okay. So it's like, or 100,000, sorry. Yeah, 10%. So it's less money, but it's definitely a beautiful little community up there. Yeah. Everybody is really connected with each other. And a lot of Canadian artists have connections to Nashville too. They come down here to write and create music too.
Yeah. This episode is brought to you by Sennheiser microphones. When we first started this podcast, we were using some older microphones, and Sennheiser came in and sponsored us and gave us some MK4s and 914s. And I mean, I'm telling you, it's made all of the difference in the world. We love these microphones. We use them at the listening room as well. And I just can't say enough great things about them. Go check out Sennheiser.com. If you are into music in any way, their microphones are hands down the best on the planet. Go check them out, Sennheiser.com. And thank you, Sennheiser, for the support and the sponsorship. We love y'all. All right, let's go into another one. Walk me through how you met Mickey Guyton.
Oh man, yeah. So Mickey, boy, I remember the day I met her. My publisher set me up, Scott Sherrod and Suzanne Strickland at Rare Spark, which was the publishing company I was signed to at the time. They were running my calendar, and so they set me up to write with her. And they said, "This girl is amazing. She came from the scene in LA. She'd been singing a lot out there, and she had a deal here. And so we got in the songwriting room together, and I just loved her from the first moment. I mean, she was so authentic and funny and smart, and then she opened her mouth to sing, and it was like, woof, my hair blew back. So it was like, this girl could sing the phone book. Like, sometimes it's hard when somebody can sing the phone book and make it sound good, you know? It's like, sing the alphabet and it'll sound really great. Then it's almost hard to write with someone like that, because everything you write is going to sound amazing coming out of their mouth. But we started writing together pretty regularly, and man, oh man, it was quite a journey, because she was trying, and her team, her label, they were all trying to find the right songs that would break her career open. And yet it was during a time when it was really difficult to get a female artist played on the radio, a new female artist especially. And Mickey had the extra challenge of being the one and only Black woman to be signed to a country label. And so there was so much second guessing that happened around what would be right, what would connect with the audience. And so we wrote for years and wrote so many great songs I still love. One of them that found its way onto one of my records, Myself, you know. And the songs would just, people would say that the feedback she would get was, oh, these songs are great, but it just feels like too country. Is anybody going to believe that you're this country? Or these songs are great, but they're really pop. And if they're this pop, then nobody's going to believe that you're country. You know, so there's this whole, how do you break a Black woman into the country music radio, scene? And eventually it got to the point where we were just getting really, really frustrated. And I'm talking 10 years of writing together. And during that time, we had found our way to Karen Kozowski as a co-writer, who is an amazing Canadian also, but Nashville-based producer-writer. And also Emma Lee was another co-writer of ours. And so we had been writing some things together, and we just, nothing was quite getting that response it needed to get the team behind it, to get it out to radio. And so we decided we were going to get together for like kind of one last hurrah in a way. Cause I had an exit strategy. Honestly, I was like, I'm going to go to nursing school. Cause if I can't make this happen, I'm going to go to nursing school. And then I can at least support my songwriting habit by doing some nursing shifts, you know? And Mickey was like, I feel like I'm just going to peace out. Like, I don't think I can do this anymore. And we got together, and I remember Mickey was talking about, we were talking about it that day, and she looked at me and she said, Victoria, you have a daughter. What are you going to tell her about how things work in the world and in this industry? Are you going to just let her grow up and make her own mistakes and find out that it's not fair? Or are you going to try and prepare her somehow by warning her? You know? And I was like, I don't know. I ask myself that sometimes. And then Emma Lee, our co-writer, was sitting in the room, and she was like, we need to write that today. And we had this moment of, are we really going to write this? Because it's really real and it's really raw, and radio's never going to play this. And then we thought, you know what? No, we just need to write the truth. And so we ended up writing a song called What Are You Gonna Tell Her? And a few months later, it was kind of crazy. COVID hit. Mickey's career started taking off because some of her music was sort of leaked online, and then it just blew up, and with Black Like Me. And then What Are You Gonna Tell Her became the first song ever performed, original song ever performed by a Black woman on the Academy of Country Music Awards, when she performed it backed up by Keith Urban. And I was sitting on my couch, you know, in COVID, in my pajamas, watching it and just going, I can't believe this. And then it became a special exhibit at the Country Music Hall of Fame about the need for more diversity in country music. And I got to take my daughters to see it. And that was a really beautiful moment to show them, this is a song that you were part of creating. This is part of your story. And look where it's gone, and look what it's saying to people. And that was so beautiful. And then the song was also on Mickey's Bridges record, which got nominated for a Grammy. So we got to go to the Grammy Awards and cheer Mickey on there. And it was, I never dreamed I would be at the Grammy Awards, you know, as nominated for a project. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see how emotional you are just talking about it. That song is really, really special in so many ways. When you were in the writer's room that day and realized, like, okay, we just have to get this out. What were some of the ideas that were thrown around? Was it a really hard song to write because it was so personal?
Yeah, the chorus came out really fast because it was just, what are you going to tell her? You know, it was just what we're saying. But then we were like, what are the verses going to be? And so we started to think of little scenarios or little examples. And mostly what we were going to was kind of sugar-coated things, because a lot of the time when you're thinking about what do we want to write, it needs to be within the radio box, right? It needs to be palatable to people. It can't be too harsh. And then at one point, I remember saying something about, you know, like when my daughter goes over to somebody's house, she just believes that her friend's older brother is going to keep his hands to himself. You know, do I need to warn her that he might not? And what happens if he doesn't? And then is anybody going to believe her? Those are the kinds of things that I ask myself. And then my co-writers, you know, they were like, I think that's what the song needs to be. That's the first part of the song. And then it just needs to go from there. And we need to stay in that space where it's that raw, but that true. And so we worked really hard to stay in that space. And it was hard. And then when we finished the song, Mickey sang it in the studio, because we wrote it in the studio with Karen playing on the piano. And Mickey went in there and she kept crying so hard that she couldn't sing. So she'd have to like take a moment and calm down and then sing. And that's actually what found its way out into the world. That's the master that got released. Yeah. It's from that day. Yeah.
That's so amazing. Can we hear a little bit of that one?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me move the mic a little here. Okay. Oh, put my headphones on so I can hear. All right. She thinks life is fair. God hears every prayer, and everyone gets there ever after. She thinks love is love, and if you work hard, that's enough. Skin's just skin, and it doesn't matter. And that her friend's older brother's gonna keep his hands to himself. And that somebody's gonna believe her when she tells. But what are you gonna tell her when she's wrong? Will you just shrug and say it's been that way all along? What are you gonna tell her when she figures out that all this time you've built her up just so the world could let her down? Yeah, what do you tell her? What are you gonna tell her?
Such a special song.
Thank you. It's rare for me to write something that's so real about my family, because it's hard, you know. It's like, it's one thing to write about yourself, but when you're writing about your family and your kids, it's like another level of vulnerability that has to be lifted. So, yeah.
And I think it goes back to, you know, what we were just talking about, like when you are vulnerable in the room and you maybe don't think about like even Mickey or another artist, like, I think this person could cut this, or like this fits in kind of like this area of country music, but you're more writing personal and for you, and that's it. Those are sometimes, and most of the time, I think the biggest, deepest songs, because what you're going through, a lot of people in the world are going through too.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's those hard things to get out on paper and put lyrics to music and all of that. But it's those things that hit home so much. It's not just another beer drinking, driving down the road song. It's, you know what I mean? It's so special.
Yeah, it's true. It's a beautiful form of therapy to be a songwriter, you know. It's like nothing else, because doing that in community with other people is just such a level of vulnerability, and it's I get to see the source in action with people working together, and it's really magic. Yeah.
Well, we're so glad that you wrote that, because it's just a great song.
Thank you.
I want to talk about a song that you wrote. What was it, like 27 years ago?
17 years ago.
Okay. I knew it was a long time ago. Take me into, well, I won't even tee it up. You know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So that divorce that I was telling you about, one of the first co-writes that I did after that, when I made myself co-write, was with an amazing songwriter named Tia Sillers, who wrote the song I Hope You Dance and There's Your Trouble and Blue on Black, all these amazing songs. And so I was lucky enough to be brought into the room to write with Tia and my dear friend Tanya Hancheroff, who is a Canadian amazing, like, secret weapon of Nashville. She sings backgrounds for all sorts of people, and it's amazing. So the three of us were writing together, and two of the three of us were going through heartbreak at the time. And it was a scenario where we had broken up, but it was like trying to cut off communication after, you know, and that can be really difficult sometimes. And so we were starting to try and get a sense of, who are we without this codependent relationship? And so we wrote this song. And I remember thinking at the time, this really sounds like it'd be a cool Reba McEntire song. You know, our publisher should pitch this to Reba. And so we demoed the song, and they pitched it to Reba, and Reba's team put it on hold for her project. And I was like, yeah, I was right. This is going to be awesome. You know, she's going to cut this song. And so her studio date comes, and the song's still on hold. And then her studio date goes, and the song is not on hold anymore, and it's not been cut. And it's like, so that did not happen. And of course, you're the last to know as a songwriter. You know, it's like, okay, nobody wants to tell you the bad news. They'll tell you the good news fast, but not the bad news. So I thought, well, geez, you know, this song just feels like, I don't know, it's just interesting and fun and different. It's a weird kind of structural song. It doesn't have a chorus the same as other songs do. And I really loved singing it. And I was performing at various places, and eventually the listening room being one of them, which I have to take a moment and say, the existence of the listening room in this town has been crucial for songwriters. I have survived sometimes. I have kept food on the table sometimes as a songwriter, because the listening room valued what I do as a songwriter and allowed me to be paid for it in performance. And that was not the case most of the time. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. But anyhow, you know, I would perform it live, and I thought, I think I'm going to put this on my record when I made my first record. And I did. And then next thing you know, I'm going out on tour, right? I get this record deal, and they send me out on tour, and I'm opening for Reba McEntire. And I'm playing this song. And I'm kind of like, I wonder if she notices, you know, this is the song she had on hold. She probably didn't even remember. It's probably the song she had on hold. But played it all those years on tour. And then, you know, years pass and years pass and years pass. And all of a sudden, this past spring, I get a phone call. And it's from my publisher, and they're saying, Reba McEntire is going to cut your song, I Can't, which 17 years later after the first time she had it on hold.
It's so crazy.
And I was like, holy cow, I can't believe that song is still relevant and still around. And what's it going to sound like? I'm so intrigued. And she sure did. She cut the heck out of it with Dave Cobb producing, and she released it as her single this spring and debuted it on The Voice, complete with pyrotechnics and rain and a choir. It was like, wow! I was watching from home. My head almost exploded because that was the first time I had a chance to hear it. And then I got to hear the actual recording, which was so amazing. And she also played it on the Academy of Country Music Awards, which was a beautiful thing to watch too. Yeah. So, hey, I got my Reba cut. After all these years. I can finally say I made it.
Yes. Yeah, let's hear that one. Bit of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a funny little song. It doesn't have a high chorus, but I'll add it's like a high bridge, so I'll add that on the end.
Okay.
I got the thunder in my bones. I got the trouble in my soul. Drowning in tears, my eyes were too proud to cry. I hear you knocking at my door, but I can't open it no more. 'Cause this heart's half full of rain and rising high. Sometimes all that you can do is just survive. I can't row you across right now. I can't row you across right now. I'm too busy building a bridge. I can't throw you a line right now. I can't throw you a line right now. I'm too busy trying to live. And then this is the bridge. Let go of the love, let go of the anchor, let go of the chain. Don't reach for me and don't call my name. Shake off the past and baby, just swim for the shore. Blow me a kiss and hope for the best. Wish what you will, take what you get. Do what you want, but I can't save you no more. Do what you want, but I can't save you no more.
Come on.
It kind of sounds like Reba, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yes.
I can't do the but she nails that.
Have you gotten to meet her?
I met her when we were touring, and she was lovely. She's had the same band and crew for a really long time, and you can tell when an artist is a good person because that happens. People don't want to leave.
Yeah.
And I remember she closed down a restaurant in St. John's, Newfoundland, and told us all, she invited me and my manager too, and she was like, everybody just go eat, drink what you want. It's on me for the night. And we had a really fun time in Newfoundland.
That's awesome. With songwriting, one of the things I love about you is you have this amazing career. You've written all these great songs, but you pour yourself into others, and you're a teacher.
Yeah.
So, like walk through how that happened and you got involved with Belmont.
Well, it's so many things. So many of the opportunities that I've found in my career have been just doors that opened that I didn't know were there. And then I was like, wait, I'm qualified to do this? I guess they think I am, so I guess I'll try and see what, it's like fake it till you make it. Because you just walk through life with I don't know, I just have a complex about not deserving what I'm getting. But it's so crazy. So I started being asked to teach master classes as a songwriter, and I was like, I guess I can teach. I know how to write, but I'm not sure how to communicate about what I'm doing when I'm writing. So I started to think about it analytically and create some sort of lesson plans for master classes. And I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. Actually, I can figure out how to say, how to teach somebody this. And then as time went on, I was offered a job as an instructor in the songwriting department at Belmont University, right on Music Row. And I was like, me? But it was amazing, being given that opportunity. I get to work with students from all over the world who are going to be the next songwriters in this town. You know, they're going to be the next, not just songwriters, but publishers and record label execs and managers and everything. Yeah. I mean, Belmont just populates this business. Yeah. And I've always been honestly a little jealous because I didn't go to Belmont. I would have if there'd been a songwriting degree, but you know, back when I was there, in college, but I didn't go there, so I was like, how do I get in on this secret Belmont handshake everybody seems to have? But now I feel like I get to be there for the beginning of seeing somebody take their first steps in really trying to understand what commercial songwriting is. And then I feel like I can give them information that would, if I had known the things that I'm able to teach now, when I first came to town, it would have probably saved 10 years off my journey. Yeah. Just how to collaborate, how to write songs that meet certain genre expectations. There's just so much about it. The importance of networking, all of those things, right? And I get to see these students come in and I get to see them grow. The only thing I love as much as writing songs is talking about writing songs. Yeah. And I get to do that when I'm teaching. And the beautiful thing is that they allow me to teach a few days a week and then I write a few days a week. And so I get to do both things. And Belmont very much wants their instructors to be active in the industry. It's not like I used to have hits. It's like they want you to be in it now. Yeah. And I love that because it's supportive of my career too. So hopefully I can thrive in what I'm doing and at the same time help other people thrive in what they're doing. Because there's nothing like, I had the first experience last spring of watching a whole bunch of my students walk across the stage at graduation. And I realized, I mean, I was talking to them and they're bound for all these different parts of the industry, different parts of the country. And I was like, I'm going to know so many people. It's going to be so beautiful to know all of these people, to have all of these friends, and to see people thrive and have huge careers and feel like maybe there's a tiny seed of something that I said or did or helped them with in that. You know, it almost makes you feel like there's more little bits of you flying around in the world somehow.
I love that.
So yeah, I really love it.
Yeah. We have a lot of people that listen to this podcast that are aspiring writers or artists or whatever. I'm curious, what challenges do you hear from your students? Like, what is one challenge that pops in your mind of like where the industry is today, something that they have to kind of overcome, and then what's like your number one word of advice that you give them?
So there's always the question of how do we get to the point where a team wants to invest money and time in us as an artist or as a songwriter, right? Like, how do I get to the point where somebody wants to sign me or wants to take that financial risk on me? And now more than ever, it's a time when you have to be pretty self-sufficient for a long time to make things happen for yourself. There's not as much developmental signing happening as there was. I mean, when I was first signed, I'd only written maybe 30 songs. That's crazy. That's crazy to think. Now you have to have income coming in already as a songwriter a lot of the time to get signed now, or to have, you know, songs out there as an artist that are already getting attention. So my advice is always, you know, first of all, you're going to have to start your own train rolling before anybody else is going to want to jump on it. So don't just sit there in the station and wait for somebody to show you where the track is. Make your own track and go and figure out what you want and follow that. And trying to be true to yourself and what you want to, how you envision your career being, what's important to you, what are your values, what do you want your music to do in the world? Keeping all of that big picture in mind when you're thinking about what that helps you discover what your brand is really as an artist or as a songwriter. So if you can start that train rolling, the other thing is that people always or often want to get into rooms with people who are very well established as songwriters to write with them, in hopes that would help them, you know, get up the ladder. Yeah. And that's not ever really how it happens. It's the people around you that become your class of and you work your way up the ladder with those people.
Yeah.
And so look for the gold in the people around you. Find collaborators, find people that inspire you, find team members, find somebody to help you if you're overwhelmed and you need help with social media or management or whatever. Find that among your friends, among your community, and give somebody a shot at doing it first, and then that will maybe become your team later, or maybe that will help you get to the point where other people are taking more interest in what you're doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a work ethic thing too. It's like, if you want to be a songwriter, you got to be prepared to get in the chair and do it over and over and over again. Don't be precious about your songs. Don't hold on to them too hard. Write it. Maybe it's great. Maybe it's not. Move on. Write more. And there's nothing wrong with editing a song, but you'll see sometimes songwriters getting stuck with, I have these few songs and these are the ones, it's not, if you keep going, there's more where that came from and it'll be better. So, yeah.
What do you think that magic coal is to get the train running? Socials?
Yeah, a lot of the time it's socials. And that's such a hard question to answer. It's different all the time, right? Definitely social media is something that gets attention of record labels, having music released and getting streams on it.
Yeah.
As an artist. As a songwriter, a lot of it has to do with your community. A lot of it has to do with who you're writing with. And if you're writing with your people around you and the artists around you that inspire you, then when something good happens for one of those people, it's going to help everybody in that group. And so, if Lainey Wilson gets signed to her first record deal, then you might have a song on her first record because you were writing with her before anybody else was. And then you're carried along. Then you get a publishing deal because you have a song on the Lainey Wilson record. Yeah. So it kind of all carries itself through. So network is hugely important. And you can find network. Obviously, if you're in Nashville, there's network everywhere here. But if you're not in Nashville, there are ways that you can plug in. Like, you can become a member of Nashville Songwriters Association. They have great educational seminars that they offer in Nashville, or they have chapters all over the world. Yeah. There's probably one close to wherever you are, where you're listening. And also there's organizations like Songtown or Global Songwriters Connection. Yeah. Great organizations that help train songwriters on how to write commercially, but also how to navigate the business and find their way into those opportunities that they need. So, network, if I could go back in time and visit myself 27 years ago when I first came here and give myself one piece of advice, it would be that network is equally as important as craft. And I made the mistake of thinking that if I wrote the best songs, that's all that would matter. But you can write the best songs, but if you don't have the community in place and the friendships in place to make those songs go anywhere, then nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
So, super important. And thinking about network as friendships. I like to redefine the word networking as friendships. Yeah. Because that's really what it
smart.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like a big scary business network thing. It's like, who are your friends?
Yeah, and I mean, especially in this town, Nashville is a small town.
Yeah,
it's like fastest growing city and like the it city and all of that, and like people coming in, I think look at it and it's like, oh my gosh, there's like cranes everywhere, and the town is so big. But in our industry, it is about who you know, and people see through that BS.
Yeah,
if it's if you have a motive and that's it, then I don't think it will go anywhere. But if you become friends and you build this community, I think that's such a great way to look at it, because that's what becomes special.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not about what can you offer me. If you go into a relationship with somebody in your networking process, it's really what do I have to offer you?
Yeah.
And if you can think of it that way, what do I have to give this person? Is it just conversation? Is it a compliment? Is it some help? Is it connecting them with someone else? Do I have songs to offer? What might it be? Yeah. And if you can think of it from the inside out instead of I need them to give me X, then it's a lot more empowering and a lot more positive way of thinking about it.
Yeah. Love it. Well, I always end on the same question, and you've already answered it, because I always ask, like, if you could go back to 8-year-old you,
I pre-answered
what
your
advice
question.
would you give yourself? So thanks for already answering that question, and great advice. And we are so glad that you did not pursue zoology, you did not pursue nursing, and you are doing what you're doing and pouring yourself into these songs that we get to hear on the radio and working with the next generation of songwriters and music industry folks. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Chris. It's been such a pleasure to sit here with you, and thank you for everything that you do for songwriters in this town.
Thank you. We always love having you, and this is your home. You know that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody out there listening. This has been another episode of Stories Behind the Songs. I'm Chris Blair. You've been listening to Victoria Banks, and as always, we'll put all the links to her socials and music and everything in our liner notes, so check that out. Share this, subscribe, let everybody know about this podcast. We appreciate it, and we will see you next time. Thank you for listening to another episode of Stories Behind the Songs with Chris Blair. Make sure to give us a follow on Spotify if you enjoyed this episode, and make sure you click that notification button so you can keep notified when new episodes come out. We release brand new episodes every Tuesday, and you can find us on YouTube at Stories Behind the Songs with Chris Blair, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to send us a comment letting us know what you thought of the episodes. We love getting your feedback, and share this with your friends. The more we grow, the more that we can keep doing this. It's our mission to bring you all of these great stories behind the songs from some of Nashville's most iconic artists and songwriters, publishers, producers, everyone in between, and a lot of my great friends. We love what we do, and we love sharing their stories with you. We appreciate all of the continued support. Thanks also to all of our sponsors, and we will see you all next week.